الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على أفضلهم وخاتم النبيين محمد الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ونزلنا عليك الكتاب تبيانا لكل شيء وهدى ورحمة وبشرى للمسلمين صدق الله العظيم. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters here at RICOI, the Research and Information Center on Islam in Tamantun, Dr. Ismail, in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. We thank you for your kind invitation to address tonight, hopefully beneficially, the topic, the Quran, secularism and crime. And let us begin by pointing out, like in the same way that there are different kinds of lies, so too there are different kinds of crimes. You may have heard that there are normal lies, and then there are great lies, and then there's 9/11. Similarly, there are normal crimes, and then there are great crimes, and then there are state crimes. And on the list of state crimes, pride of place belongs, and no one should take offense to my saying so, to the terrorist state of Israel. And so we are dealing with a complex subject, not simple crime. And it will be our endeavor to attempt to turn to the Quran and to He who was sent to teach the Quran, Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, to throw some light on the subject of secularism and crime. There are different kinds of secularism. There is political secularism. And political secularism has made a mess of the political world. It has given us lots of things that are negative. Political secularism, insisting that religion and politics must be kept separate from each other. Political secularism. And if we have the time, we will look at some of the things that has happened in consequence of political secularism. And then there's economic secularism, the secularization of the market, the secularization of money, of finance, the emergence of a banking system, which is thoroughly secular, has no religion in it at all. There is evidence of tremendous damage which has been done, and criminal acts which have been committed at the very highest level through the secularization of the economy and of money. There is the secularization of education. That we had Al-Azhar University, and as I'm fond of saying, one Sunday morning Al-Azhar woke up and rubbed his eyes and looked down the road and said, "What's that?" It was Cairo University. And it came to present the mother of all challenges to the system of education which was based on that which was sacred. It came to give a secular model of education. And what has come out of the university system is now before us to examine and to evaluate. But we are more concerned tonight to look at another aspect of secularization, and that is the secularization of knowledge, and how the secularization of knowledge, from our perspective, derived from the Qur'an and the Sunnah, has laid the foundation for a world not only of increasing crime, but a world that seems to be heading to chaos and anarchy, and eventually to the law of the jungle. To begin our examination of the subject of secularization of knowledge, we want to turn to Islamic eschatology. The Prophet, Allah's blessings be upon him, spoke to us about dajjal. And he said something strange. He said, every prophet, this is Sahih Bukhari, every prophet has warned his people about Dajjal, the false Messiah, Al-Masihud Dajjal. But I am going to tell you something that no one ever said before me. So this must be particularly important, saved for the last, because this is the last prophet. What is it? He said that Dajjal sees with his left eye. He is blind in the right eye. It looks like a bulging grape. But your Lord is not one-eyed. Between his eyes, on his forehead, is written the words kafir, kafara, meaning a disbeliever. And every mu'min, a mu'min being the one who has not only accepted the truth of Islam, but that truth has penetrated the heart. So now he has something called faith, mu'min. Every mu'min will be able to read the word kafir on his forehead. We have a sect of Muslims today who have made themselves quite prominent in aligning themselves with NATO to bring down the regime of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, using NATO weapons and NATO money and so on. They call the Salafi. And they are actively at work again in Syria and in northern Mali. Very prominent, the Salafi Muslims. And they have a methodology, and that is that only Allah and His Messenger are authorized to interpret. The Arabic word is ta'wil, interpretation. Tafsir, explanation. Ta'wil, interpretation. Only Allah and His Messenger are authorized to interpret. So if the hadith says that Dajjal is going to ride on a donkey, you know the rest. No? Dajjal will ride on a donkey. You see, this is the problem. Because of modern technology, all these lectures are on YouTube. And now they accuse me, oh, Brother Imran, we've heard it already. We've heard it already. Yes, but this audience has not heard it. So if you heard it already, go listen to somebody else, man. Let them listen to me. We heard it already. You're repeating yourself. The Dajjal will ride on a donkey. And the donkey would travel as fast as the clouds. And the donkey will have his ears stretched out wide. Salafi methodology is that since Allah and His Messenger have not interpreted this, it has to be understood literally. And so they wait for the flying donkey. We do not utter these words in a disparaging way. That's not the way of scholarship. We do not intend to humiliate them. This is a learned discourse. This is their methodology, and they're waiting for the flying donkey. Similarly, when the Prophet said, Allah's blessings be upon him, that the river Euphrates will uncover a mountain of gold. And you know the rest of the hadith. If not, well, you got homework to do. They're waiting for a mountain of the metal to come out of the river. We use a different methodology. We use what is known as the Sufi methodology. And there, by using the word Sufi, and I now open myself to attacks. The Sufi methodology recognizes that this is religious symbolism. And it has to be interpreted. And the flying donkey is already here. This young man, I won't mention his name, just arrived at the airport from Britain. And from the airport he went to the hotel and he came here. He came using the flying donkey. And the mountain of gold has already come. If you will listen to my lecture on Islam, the petrodollar and beyond. The mountain of gold came into being when Henry Kissinger was able to fool King Faisal rahimahullah into agreeing to sell oil for only bogus and fraudulent and utterly haram US dollars. And as a consequence, an ocean of oil now began to function as a mountain of gold. And the Bretton Woods monetary system gave way to the new petrodollar monetary system. This is our interpretation. And when we interpret, we do not do it in a dogmatic way. We say no. When we interpret, please do not accept our interpretation unless and until you are convinced that it is correct. Fair enough. So now we say we have a difference with the Salafi. They are waiting for a man to appear who will declare, I am the Messiah. And when that man declares that he is the Messiah, they will recognize him to be Dajjal only if he has one eye. And if on his forehead they can read the word kafir. Our methodology is different. We recognize this to be religious symbolism. We say that when Dajjal sees with his left eye, it symbolizes external sight, knowledge which comes from external observation and rational inquiry, the scientific method. And when Dajjal is blind in the right eye, it symbolizes internal blindness. And believe you me, politicians are not the only ones who are internally blind. There are many others as well. But politicians, head of the list, the politicians are at the top of the list. When Dajjal is blind in the right eye, it symbolizes internal blindness. This is epistemology, the study of what is knowledge and what are the sources of knowledge and how is knowledge acquired. Dajjal now gives to the world a theory of knowledge, or an epistemology. The knowledge comes only from external observation and rational inquiry. And only that can be known which can be observed. Only that can be known which can be observed. And since this is the only world that we can observe, this is the only world that we can know. From there, you make a jump to the next conclusion. Since this is the only world that we can know, this is the only world which exists. Welcome to materialism. The secularization of knowledge led to the conclusion that knowledge comes only from external observation and rational inquiry. And that in turn led to the conclusion, casually accepted really, that this is the only world which exists, that there is no other world beside this world. And so there is no reality beyond material reality, and that's materialism. This secularization of knowledge is the mother of the whole world of secularism. It denies an unseen world. Al-Ghaib, says the Qur'an. But that unseen world is so important that Allah begins the Qur'an with Al-Ghaib. Alif Lam Mim, Ba'da A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajim. Alif Lam Mim, ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالغيب. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب. At the top of the list is faith in that which lies beyond your normal observation. Faith in an unseen world. Today, knowledge which comes from that unseen world is rejected. It's not really knowledge. It belongs to a place in Orlando called Disneyland. And so you do not, as a scholar, God help you, you do not quote from the scriptures with conviction. No, it's just another branch of knowledge. It has to be dissected like all other branches of knowledge. And we have a different way of dealing with our scriptures than you Muslims. There's no such thing as faith anymore in anything unseen. Faith is that which you can hold in your hands. Huh? And so, mankind, in consequence of a secular way of life, which has as its foundation the secularization of knowledge, mankind has been taken for a ride by the one-eyed man, Dajjal. I have come to the conclusion that Dajjal is the author and the architect of modern Western civilization. There has never been a civilization in human history like modern Western civilization. It is an absolutely amazing civilization. It has surpassed every other civilization in human history, in every branch of knowledge, which is located, knowledge which comes from the left eye. It has extended the frontiers of knowledge in every branch of knowledge, which is based on knowledge which comes from the left eye. But it remains a civilization which is internally blind. And as a consequence of that internal blindness, it has been unable to sustain values. And today it has sunk. It has sunk so low that it is shameful to record that that civilization is now pronouncing a marriage certificate of a man with another man. And I do hope that my students in France are listening. I do hope that my students in France, we have one from France who is here, just flew in, of Moroccan origin, but he's French. And you know what's happening in France. That the 7 to 8 million Muslim community, how many are they? 4 5 million Muslim community of France, mostly North African, are being courted with great enthusiasm and insistence, are being courted, and the plan is to have them embraced by those who are pursuing a secular and a nationalist agenda. Is this correct? It is. And so today's lecture delivers a gentle warning. I know there will be many other scholars of Islam in France who will do more than what I am doing, but I want to add my voice to theirs, to warn the Muslims of France not to be embraced by those whose leaders are one-eyed and whose followers are also one-eyed, because they are secular nationalists. Western civilization has been unable to sustain values. Where once upon a time Britain held on to values like character and integrity and honesty and truthfulness. Today at the highest level of diplomacy, and for the last 100 years or more, British diplomacy has been based on lies and deception, and concealing the truth and double-crossing people. To speak about the United States is to speak about something even worse than what has happened to Britain. Modern Western civilization is now rotting at its heart. It is decadent. It is floating to they don't know where they're going. Society is unraveling. People are lost. The number of people committing suicide is alarming. Alarming. People commit suicide because they don't know why they should live anymore. Life has lost meaning and purpose, and so they commit suicide. And some of them want to be assisted in the suicide. Let it be done in a medically proper way. Assisted suicide. Why? Because life is meaningless. Inside there is nothing. And it is when you create a world like that which Dajjal has created, and values are collapsing, that you lay the foundation for a world of endless crime, a world of chaos and anarchy, and for the law of the jungle to take over. Having done that, having taken you from secularism to materialism, to the collapse of values, we can now see clearly what is written on the forehead of modern Western civilization. The Salafi are still waiting for the man who will be one-eyed and who will have kafir written on his forehead. But we are not waiting. We are looking at modern Western civilization and we are seeing kafir written on his forehead. And that's why so many of our students in Britain, in France, in the United States, in Canada, in Holland, in Belgium, want to make hijrah. And when they want to make hijrah, one of the first countries that they turn to is, guess what? Malaysia. They want to come to Malaysia or to the Maghreb, Algeria and Morocco and so on. But the Malaysian immigration laws are very strict. And so maybe our audience here tonight have a job to do to help their brothers in Europe and in the United States who want to leave and come and live amongst us. How does Dajjal reduce a people to what the Qur'an has described in Suratul Hashr? And now I quote the Qur'an for another time. Allah says in the Qur'an, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. And do not become like those who have forgotten Allah. And as a consequence of forgetting Allah, turning away from Allah, secularizing themselves, their lives, turning away from the unseen world, turning away from the world of the sacred, turning away from the angels and the jinn, and from heaven and from hell, and from the prophets and the books, and from Allah, and adopting the materialistic way of life. Do not be like those who have done that, and as a consequence have forgotten their own selves. They have forgotten who they are. They have forgotten what it is to be a human being. They have forgotten what a human values. It is when you are living in the embrace of the sacred that you know about a value called hospitality. No matter how poor the Arab is, no matter what difficulties he may be living in, the Arab wants to excel all other people in hospitality. How do you explain that? It is explained in this way, that values come from Allah. There are no such thing as secular values. No. Secular man makes his own values. And what is good for me may not be good for you. What I consider to be honesty, you may be considering to be something else. And what is considered to be a value today, tomorrow may be ditched. If the Englishmen of 100 years ago would have come back today, and the Frenchmen of 100 years ago would have come back, Charles de Gaulle would have come back today, and hear that France is enacting legislation to allow a man to marry another man, the general will pull out his rifle. The General Charles de Gaulle will be very angry, because the values of his generation have today been ditched. Secularism makes its own values and keeps on changing those values, and they're not being changed by accident. The world is not moving in this direction of increasing godlessness by accident. There is a mastermind. There's a great architect who brought the secular age into being and who is taking the world in this direction. And it is Islamic eschatology who tells us who he is. He is Dajjal, the false Messiah. He uses certain weapons after he secularized you. I rented an apartment in Gombak. My landlord was Chinese. He kept his apartment very well, meticulously clean. I was so happy to see how this man took care of his apartment. And he left some furniture in the apartment. And it was with some pride that he showed us this huge television set in the sitting room. And then another one, slightly smaller, in the master bedroom. I'm leaving these for you, he said. Can you imagine the horror on his face when we told him we don't want it? He could not understand how could a people live without television. And as big a television set as this. So we said, could you kindly take it out, please? And no television in my home. No radio in my home. And we don't read the daily newspapers. And as a consequence, I want to share with you the secret. I live a happy life, alhamdulillah. I live a very happy life with no television. But if you allow your children to be brought up on television, Dajjal is going to brainwash them. And one of the first things that they will pay as a price, those who constantly watch television, is that you will lose your capacity for clarity of thought. Try it and see. He brainwashes you. And the veils start coming down before your eyes. No people on the face of the earth today have more veils before their eyes. And I'm not ill-speaking them, because I lived in the United States for 12 years. And I know how many wonderful people there are in that country. I'm not talking only about colored Americans and black Americans. I'm also talking about white Americans who have treated me very well and who have been very good people. But no people on the face of the earth today are more brainwashed. Ask any European and he'll tell you that, than the Americans. And how did Dajjal achieve it? He achieved it with television. With ABC and NBC and CNN and CFF and whatever and whatever and whatever. And American Idol and American Heroes and this and that and the other. And as you're fed every day with this rubbish coming out of television, not only are you brainwashed, not only do you now allow them to do your thinking for you, they're doing it, they're programming you, but you are damaged intellectually. You lose the capacity for clarity of thought. So if you want to study eschatology, if in your heart there's a desire, and I'm speaking to you most of all in France tonight, if in your heart there's this longing to master ilmu akhirul zaman, remember, you cannot penetrate the subject of the last age. You cannot penetrate it unless you have the capacity to interpret religious symbolism, because it is pregnant with religious symbolism. And you cannot interpret religious symbolism based upon the knowledge you got from a Darul Uloom or from Al-Azhar University or from MIT. No. That clarity of thought comes when the mind has been washed and clean, and when there is nur in the mind. When Dajjal brainwashes you, now there are going to be some who are going to be annoyed with me, but after the lecture we can be friends, okay? I have a job to do, allow me to do it. I don't mean to offend you. No, I don't mean to offend you, but I have a job to do, let me do it. When Dajjal has brainwashed you sufficiently, then what he does is, if you look at the photographs of American presidents these last 200 years, from the first one, was it George Washington? First one? And then the second and the third, and Abraham Lincoln and all. Did you notice that there was something on their faces called a beard? Did you notice? Something on the face called a beard? And do you notice that now at the end, in the Bill Clinton and George Bush era, it seems as though the beard seems to have disappeared? Is it by accident? No, it's not by accident. I was invited to lecture at the University of Chicago, and they thought, today we're going to hang him. Today we're going to hang him. And they asked me to speak on the status of women in Islam. And the university came out. Faculty came out and so on to witness the hanging of an Islamic scholar. What could Islam say about the status of women in Islam? Why didn't you choose another topic? So I began my lecture by defining the male and defining the female. And one thing nice about the American people, if you get them in the right mood, you're good for the rest of the lecture. They're very nice people in this respect. I said, well, the Lord Most High put a beard on the face of the male for two reasons. The first, of course, is to distinguish the male from the female from a distance. So you don't have to look at any other part of the body. What's the second reason?
Well, I know it's a grandchildren.
And I stopped. I want them to eat out of my hands. So they're scratching their head. What is the second reason? And when I had them sufficiently in my hands, I said, this is very simple. Allah put the beard there so babies can play with it. They didn't stop laughing for 5 minutes. And I had no problems for the rest of the evening, except for the Pakistani students. What happened to the beard? Even as great a scholar as Muhammad Iqbal, one of our greatest scholars of Islam of the modern age, Muhammad Iqbal, even he shaved off the beard. What is he going to do when he has to stand before his master, the messenger of Allah, on Judgment Day? What is he going to do when he has to stand before his Lord on Judgment Day? Where are you going to hide your face when you have to stand without a beard? Who took the beard off? The answer is clear. It is Dajjal who has done it. Why did he do it? I know you're going to be angry with me, but we'll be friends afterwards. The Prophet said among the signs of Akhirul Zaman is that women will dress like men. Why would a woman dress like a man? To assume the functional role of men in society. That's why. But he went on to say that men would dress like women. And if men are to dress like women, I'm not saying you're going to dress like women, the first thing that a man will have to do is to take off the beard. Television has played a very important role in brainwashing women around the world today to take off the hijab. Many marriages are now struggling because your daughter does not want to follow in the footsteps of her mother. No. That's for the birds. This is a new world. This is a new age. We're not going to live like that anymore. This is the age of freedom. This is my body. And I will live the way I choose with my body. So no hijab. Who is the author of that? It's Dajjal. And sometimes, particularly in the shopping malls, you see hijab on top and blue jeans below. And the blue jeans become tighter and tighter, sending a message, a sexual message. And then, because there are some women who don't wear blue jeans, they wear shorts, and they're exposing their bodies, sending a sexual message. And the sexual message belongs to the sexual revolution. And the sexual revolution will culminate with sex as freely available as sunshine. That's Dajjal. That's the breakdown of values. That's the secularization of gender and of the sexual relations. He does his work meticulously. Television gives them the nice accent. She never went to the United States. No. She was born in KL. She lived all her life in KL. KL means Kuala Lumpur, if you're listening in France. But she speaks with a perfect American accent, better than the Americans themselves. Perfect. Because that is the road to progress. She doesn't want to eat roti canai anymore. It's McDonald's, Kentucky Fry. And you look down upon what was native, what was indigenous, and you're following Dajjal. She uses a special vocabulary. If grandma were to hear her, grandma would be horrified. I don't know what's grandma in Bahasa. Nini. Nini would be horrified. Because Nini knows that you have to respectfully greet people with Assalamu alaikum. But she doesn't do that, this granddaughter. She says hi. She says hi. And to say Assalamu alaikum is backwardness. And to say hi is progress. And she doesn't say Assalamu alaikum for goodbye. No, she says bye and hi. I believe it began with television. Hello? Yes. Dajjal is breaking down the bonds that Allah built for stability of the home and stability of the family and stability of the society. And that stability reduces crime. And so now she does not listen to anyone. This granddaughter of ours, she's a rebel. And not only does she not want to listen to anyone, she doesn't even want to listen to Allah. And she ascribes to herself the authority to interpret the Qur'an. Allah doesn't say so in the Quran, Allah says so, and she's now interpreting the Quran in what she calls a progressive interpretation, which she got out of the Dajjal tafsir. This defiance of all authority, we were warned about it in Surah Al-Kahf. I don't have the time to ask Jamaluddin where in Surah Al-Kahf, so he got away. In Surah Al-Kahf, where Khidr alayhi salam kills the boy, and then prays to Allah that He may send to the parents a better child who will give them more solace, zakat and rahmah. Because this boy, if he were allowed to grow up, would destroy the parents' faith. He'd be so rebellious. It is not only in this way that Dajjal unravels the family and unravels society, but before I end, let me take you for a moment into the political world and the economic world. It is not the purpose of this lecture to suggest how we should deal with crime, because the answer is obvious. You have to return to Islam. And returning to Islam means returning to Allah's deen. And returning to Allah's deen means returning to the Sharia. You cannot return to the Sharia without returning to dinar and dirham. So long as you're using this bogus and fraudulent and haram paper money, you're only making jokes with Allah when you're saying you're complying with Sharia. And you and I don't want to be joking around with Allah's deen. So we need not go to this subject. What should we do? Because we know what we have to do. So let us turn to the political system and see how the secularization of politics leads to the unraveling of society, which eventually allows the no man's land to come into being and everybody committing crime. The Khilafah state created by Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam in Medina was a plural model of a state. There were Jews living in Medina. Did the law of Islam apply on the Jews? What nonsense! What absolute nonsense! Was the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ the head of state ruling over the Jews in Medina? What nonsense! What absolute nonsense! Did the law of Islam apply to the pagan Arabs of Medina? No, it did not. Was the Prophet of Allah the ruler who ruled over the pagan Arabs in Medina? What absolute nonsense! No. It was a plural model of a state. And he, the Prophet ﷺ, had authority only over his followers. Only over his followers. It was only when there was any difference of opinion concerning interpretation of the treaty that he was the final word on interpretation of the treaty. That's all. And they gave that status to him because he negotiated the treaty over 7 long, painstaking months. That's something that President Morsi in Egypt seems to have forgotten about. A plural model of state, because it was a plural society. Allah did not create us all as one people. He created us as different nations and different tribes. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلًا. Different nations and different tribes, diversity. And our political model was one which recognized that diversity and preserved it. Why? Because the tribe and tribal relations play an important role in preserving stability of society and maintaining values in the tribe, the tribe will correct a member of the tribe who is going astray. Today it's government who has to do everything. Dajjal came with a political system which is applied helter-skelter all over the world except in Lebanon, because it didn't suit Dajjal in Lebanon. He had some special interest in Lebanon. The political model that he presented for mankind, and which was accepted so casually by scholars of Islam, was one which recognized the individual as the unit of the state, not the tribe, not the group, the individual. And as the individual becomes the unit of the state, the individual votes. One man, one vote, one woman, one vote. Tribe has nothing to do with it anymore. The wise man in the tribe no longer has more weight in his opinion than the little boy. This is thanks to Dajjal. And so now when you have one man, one vote, and the individual being recognized as the unit of the state, this individualism results in the destruction of the tribal bonds. And the tribe no longer can function as a stabilizing agent in society. And so it becomes easier for Dajjal to now destabilize and to bring about the collapse of society. Tomorrow there is anarchy. Not only do tribal bonds break up in the new secular political model, but politics without values is the politics of Satan. So around the world today, you have something called elections. I gather you in Malaysia know something about elections. And in elections there is something called money. And money talks very loudly. Money talks very loudly. Yesterday the Zionists would seek to utilize the door that is open election time by sending in mules, human mules, with suitcases, briefcases filled with USD. One of these mules, who was a Pakistani professor, told me himself, he admitted, that I was sent with this briefcase filled with US dollars, and I was not the only one, to influence the elections which led Zulfikar Ali Bhutto to respond the way that he did in rigging the election. But today, they don't have to do that anymore. The new values that they have, the secular values, is that you don't have to send paper money anymore. There's something called electronic money. And the banking system is outside of the control of governments. And so they can flood a country with limitless amount of money. The sky is the limit. And every man has his price. And they can buy and sell like in the market of cattle. And that political system eventually leads to the breakup of society. Political stability is gone. And then you end up with violence. That violence has come to many parts of the world already. There's bloodshed in many parts of the world already. We hope and pray it doesn't come to this part of the world. And then you have a government. And the government has to pay back. It's called the politics of patronage. Where you scratch my back, so I have to scratch yours. This is also criminal activity. The Prophet ﷺ described it as riba. And he cursed the practitioners of riba. The politics of patronage. That this is the government, we supported you, you must now give us the contract. Then there's something called cronyism. Cronyism. That you have to take care of your friends. You got to take care of your friends. And because of long-standing friendship, where you have to get a position, and he has to get a position, and you're laying the foundations for bloodshed tomorrow, little that you know it. And then there is the distortion of the economy. Nabi Muhammad ﷺ gave us a free and a fair market. No state interference in the market to control prices. A Hindu who comes into our market comes in with an equal status with a Muslim. No privileges for a Muslim in our market that the Hindu doesn't have. No privileges for the Malay that the Chinese doesn't have. That's the religion that came from Muhammad ﷺ. But when you distort the religion that came from him and you make your own new religion, and you give privileges to some which are denied to others, you're not only corrupting the people that you're seeking to help, you're also corrupting the economy and the market. And you're laying the foundation for a tomorrow when there'll be bloodshed. Corruption leads to injustices. It leads to oppression and eventually leads to crime. Before we end, the secularization of the market. The market is a place where you do business. And Allah defines a business transaction. A business transaction is one in which you can make a profit or suffer a loss. That's business. The money lender does not want to do that kind of business. He wants to have a guaranteed profit, and he wants to be immunized from all possibility of loss. And so he lends on interest. Riba. And Allah says, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. This is halal and that is haram because this is not a business transaction when money is lent on interest. So Allah made it haram. It was haram in Europe. For hundreds of years it was haram in Europe. And read Merchant of Venice, you will see where in Merchant of Venice it was haram. Until the French Revolution. And the French Revolution broke the back of the economy and secularized the economy. And the American Revolution and the Bolshevik Revolution, all three were very, very, very crucially important revolutions. The Bolshevik for another reason. And so now the market is a market which is corrupted, because the banking system is now powerful in the market. And when an economy is based on money being lent on interest, then money will no longer circulate through that economy. No. And so the rich will now remain permanently rich. And the poor will be imprisoned in permanent poverty. And the rich will go constantly richer. And the poor will eventually enter into destitution. And that will lead to crime. Is it so difficult to understand? That the secularization of the economy, of the market, through the introduction of the banking system, is a recipe for crime. And then finally, when you secularize money, I once participated in a seminar in Trinidad with the former governor of our central bank. He used to be the finance minister until about a year ago. Now he's the Minister of Foreign Affairs. A friend of mine. And he's a monetary economist. And I'm not a monetary economist. And we cornered him. There were two of us. And we asked him, you talking about a politician, as a politician you're talking about values. How important it is to maintain values for the society to be stable and healthy. And we have a question to ask you. Is there not such a thing as integrity of money? You said they never taught us that at university. They never taught us that at university. The secularization of money led to where we are today. It is Dr. Mahathir who explained QE1 and QE2, and QE is not Queen Elizabeth, it's quantitative easing. The US government instructs the Federal Reserve Bank, while my daughters and your daughters from Indonesia have to work as slaves, picking up our garbage and being paid 500 ringgits a month as slaves, morning to night. He instructs the Federal Reserve to write a check for $7 trillion to the banking system. Dr. Mahathir is explaining. They don't need to print the dollar anymore. They don't need the paper, they don't need the ink, they don't need the printing presses. They don't need the security vehicles and the personnel to protect the money that's being transported here and there. Just write the check, one piece of paper, and you send it to the bank. It's still not money. It is when, what's his name in Egypt? The engineer who is now the president and who wants to enforce the Sharia, Morsi. It is when Morsi begs the IMF for the $4 billion, and the IMF, using this imaginary money, then writes a check for $4 billion, and Morsi signs on behalf of Egypt to repay the money to the IMF. Now it becomes money. Until you had signed that document to repay, it was not as yet money. But now, abracadabra, and it has become money. While your daughter and my daughter has to pick up the garbage, leave her husband and leave her children in Indonesia, and come as a work as a slave for 500 measly ringgits a month. That's how they make money. So if tomorrow there's a revolution and there's bloodshed, who should we blame? When you secularize money, you end up with bloodshed. When you secularize the political system, you end up with bloodshed. When you secularize gender, you end up with bloodshed. Secularism should be taken and thrown out into the garbage bin. And let us return to the world of the sacred. This is my message to you, and this is my message to the Muslims of France. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين. I have consistently refrained from falling into the trap of commenting on other scholars and their opinions. I prefer to restrict myself to methodology, Salafi methodology, without referring to any Salafi scholar. And I have already answered that question in terms of their methodology and how it differs from mine. Secondly, my lectures are recorded and they are on YouTube for everybody to examine. That I've never forced my opinion on anyone. I respect the intellect of the audience, and at my age I think I can take the liberty of speaking to younger men and hopefully trying to lead the intellect on a road where it will grow. And that requires critical thinking. That I should not be doing the thinking for you. And I should be not forcing my opinions upon you. That you should critically assess what I have presented. And only when you are convinced that it is correct, only then should you accept it. I make mistakes. And if you do not do that, you might accept the mistake that I make and then perpetuate it. But if you critically assess what I teach, then you can pick up a mistake and then you can correct it. And I will then pray to Allah to bless you. So I'm afraid I will not be able to help you in commenting on what other scholars say about Dajjal. I restrict myself to the difference in methodology. But there's one more point, and that is that I don't think it is possible for anyone to penetrate the subject of Dajjal without a knowledge of international politics, without a knowledge of international economics and international monetary economics, an acute understanding of political history, social history. These are not subjects that are taught to our ulama. And until and unless our ulama study, for example, the Bretton Woods Accord, the Charter of the United Nations, the Articles of Agreement of the IMF, it really is improper on their part to be issuing fatwas on paper money. They are in a pathetic state, because the institutions of Islamic learning have remained fossilized and have not kept abreast of the modern age created by Dajjal. And as a consequence, they don't have the education, they don't have the knowledge with which to be able to penetrate the modern age, which is the age of Dajjal, and respond to it appropriately. All that I can do is to offer my view, and that I have done in Jerusalem in the Quran. But there is a lecture of mine at the back, the video, on Dajjal and the feminist revolution, Dajjal on money, and you can listen to these lectures. Yeah. Any more questions?
Sorry, what's the Quranic interpretation?
The Quran does not mention the word Dajjal, and you know that, don't you? You know that, yes. And the whole audience know that. And those who choose, therefore, since the Quran does not mention the word Dajjal, we don't need to bother about Dajjal, fine. I have no problem with that. You don't need to bother about Dajjal. But if I study the subject of Dajjal, I can explain the world today. And I can anticipate tomorrow, which you cannot do. And that, I think, is compelling evidence of the importance of the subject. That I can understand and penetrate the reality of the world today. For example, 15, 17 years ago, brother, and the evidence is there in writing, I said that the US dollar is going to collapse, and it must collapse, and that the monetary system based on the US dollar will collapse and will have to be replaced by a new monetary system. I said that in the same way that Pax Americana replaced Pax Britannica, that Pax Judaica will replace Pax Americana. Nobody else ever said that. Nobody else. I'm the only one. If I had not studied Dajjal, I would not be able to say this. But what I have said 15 years ago is correct. Absolutely correct. So here is compelling evidence of the importance of the subject. Even though the word Dajjal does not appear in the Quran, there's a reason why. But I don't want to deal with that now. There's a reason why. Allah has not used the word Dajjal in the Quran. Any more questions? The greatest failure of all is not the failure of the politicians, as you may want to say. It's not the failure of the bankers, no. The greatest failure of all is the failure of our scholars, our ulama. Today an alim has to have this hat and this gown. An alim is recognized by his dress. But yesterday it was not like that. Yesterday we all dressed the same way. We all dressed the same way. And the alim was recognized not by his dress, but by his knowledge and his capacity to apply knowledge to the world before him. And the society recognized that knowledge. Today the blind are leading the blind, and the deaf are leading the deaf. And it is extremely difficult in this collapse of scholarship, extremely difficult today to be able to locate the Khidr alayhi salam, who is the scholar, who is the only scholar, the only one who can make sense of this age, the Khidr alayhi salam, because it's gone. My teacher of blessed memory, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah. Oh, I forgot to mention, one of the signs by which you can recognize the unraveling of society is that your granddaughter doesn't say Insha'Allah anymore. She doesn't say Alhamdulillah anymore. She doesn't say Astaghfirullah anymore. All of this sacred terminology is banished from language in the new culture of hi and bye. Yes. If we are to recover scholarship, we have to follow what my teacher did. Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari rahimahullah recognized that while there was piety in intention amongst those who were going to study Islam in the institutions of Islamic learning, many of whom came from the poorest parts of society, because the wealthy people didn't bother. The poor. While there was piety, it was not a substitute for knowledge. And the curriculum of studies did not address the challenge of the modern age. Modern Western civilization has presented us with the mother of all challenges. The mother of all challenges. Yes. And we are not equipped intellectually and academically. We are not equipped to even understand the challenge, far less to respond to it. Number two, it is not just a matter of studying their scholars. Studying, for example, Friedrich Hegel and his philosophy of history. You have to do more than that. You have to be able to go to the Qur'an, and then after the Qur'an go to Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, to derive from the Qur'an that which will explain and that with which you can respond. That methodology is lacking. We consider the Qur'an to be a closed book. The books of tafsir have explained the Qur'an, and there's no more explanation. Here's an example. I was in upstate New York. I was invited to address a gathering about 200 Methodist ministers in upstate New York who were having their annual convention. And for some strange reason they invited me to come and address them. I'm the only Muslim in the gathering of 200 Methodist ministers in the United States. And I gave a talk, and at the end of it, one minister got up. He says, "What a fine talk you've delivered. And you have been so friendly with us. And that's strange. Because here is your book. And the book says," and then he started to read, "don't take the Christians and don't take the Jews as your friends." The audience was straining not to laugh. It put me in monkey pants. Don't take the Christians as your friends, says the Book of Allah. And here was I giving this lecture and very friendly with the Christians. The translation was wrong. It took me a long time to understand that. Allah says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have faith in Allah, La tattakhidul yahuda wa nasara awliya. Do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. Question. Is Allah speaking about all Jews and all Christians? Or is He speaking about some Jews and some Christians? Is that a valid question? Well, there you are. He ordered them all to bow down to Adam alayhi salam. فَسَجَدُوا إِلَّا Iblis. They all bow down except Iblis. If we take this verse by itself, in isolation, the Americans say standalone, the implication is that Iblis is an angel. Can't get away from that. Iblis is an angel. That's a wrong methodology. When you go to the whole of the Quran, then you quickly find out that angels don't disobey. No. Angels cannot disobey. But he disobeyed. So he can't be an angel. Allah is teaching a methodology that you do not study any verse of the Quran by itself in isolation. So don't take this verse by itself in isolation. No. Is Allah speaking about all Jews and all Christians? No, He could not. Why? Because elsewhere in the Quran He says, for example, وَلَتَجِدَنَّ أَقْرَبَهُمْ مَوَدَّةً لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ النَّصَارَى. That you will most certainly find in time to come, and that time is around the corner. Just watch Vladimir Putin. You will most certainly find in time to come that those who will be closest of all in love and friendship to you will be those who say we are Christians. I'm not talking about the Vatican. I'm talking about Eastern Christianity. So it could not be all Christians? No. Well then, which Christians and which Jews? Don't take them as your friends and allies. The answer is there in the words which follow. بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. Do not take such Jews and such Christians as your friends and allies, who themselves are friends and allies of each other. The Qur'an is anticipating a time which is to come, when a strange and a mysterious rapprochement will take place between some Christians and some Jews, and a Judeo-Christian friendship and alliance will emerge. The bond, Zionism. These are the Christians and Jews with whom we are prohibited from maintaining friendly ties. You think the governments that rule over us bother about this? They all met in Cairo for the last few days and they all bow down before the Zionists. All of them except Iran. All of them except Iran bow down before the Zionists. So, do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. Does not refer to all Jews and all Christians. It refers to those Jews and those Christians who form the Jewish-Christian alliance. And that Jewish-Christian alliance today rules Britain. Britain yesterday was something else. That Jewish-Christian alliance today rules the United States. And because Kennedy stepped out of line, Kennedy paid the price. That Jewish-Christian alliance today wants to rule the world. And one man stands in the way, Vladimir Putin, and the Chinese leader. And so here is an وَمَن يَتَوَلَّهُ مِنْكُمْ فَإِنَّهُ مِنْهُمْ. Whosoever from amongst you turn to them with friendship and alliance, you now belong to them, says Allah. You no longer belong to us. So when you go in your grave, you will find, to your surprise, did you not recognize as a Muslim? Because you consider them to be your friends and allies. This methodology for the study of the Qur'an has brought out the real meaning of the verse, which was never brought out before. We need this methodology, and we need the institutions of learning in which our students will be allowed to penetrate modern Western civilization, study it, its politics, its economics, its philosophy, its social relations, its view on gender and so on. And then return to the Qur'an and use the proper methodology for the Qur'an to guide you, how to understand and how to respond. If we do that, tomorrow we'll have scholars. Any more questions? I am not seeing any signs as yet. The day that I find scholars of Islam in Malaysia, for example, who will stand up and in a very learned way analyze the subject of money and recognize the monetary system to be what it is, bogus and fraudulent and haram. Dr. Mahathir has done that. And I'm not speaking in favor of anybody or against anybody. That's not my style. But the man has understood the monetary system. And he's recognized it to be unjust and fraudulent. He has done it at age 80-something, I believe. And he says, I'm not a monetary economist. And the scholars of Islam and the muftis of this country, I don't know if there is anyone, even one, who has done what Dr. Mahathir has done. And these remarks of mine should not be used in part of the politics of this country. I am not a part of that. No, I'm not a part of that. But if something is factual, I must say it's factual, regardless of consequences. And that's what Dr. Mahathir has done. He is called for the return of the gold dinar. I was speaking to Kelantan for 20-something years. Kelantan never listened to me. No, they never listened to me. I have great respect for Ustaz Nik Aziz. He's a very great man. But he never listened to me. Only when Dr. Mahathir spoke on gold dinar did they start minting dinar and dirham in Kelantan. Is that scholarship? I'm not speaking to offend people. These are facts. So I'm not seeing any signs. When I see signs, it will be scholars of Islam in the world of Islam. Maybe Algeria might start the ball rolling. Because Algeria has something called backbone. Algeria fought the French, and the French have never forgiven them. That's why they're now trying to seek revenge through northern Mali. The target is Algeria. When I see scholars of Islam standing up and analyzing the monetary system in an intelligent way and an accurate way, using the Quran and Sunnah, then I'll say, yes, I can see some sunrise. But at this moment it's only darkness. Any more questions? ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك ربنا وتعاليت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وعلى أصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين
ولا أقوى على نار الجحيم الله فهب لي التوبة واغفر ذنوبي فإنك غفور